that no
Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity.
President Trump reading today from an excerpt from a prayer President Franklin Delano Roosevelt delivered to this country on the eve of D-Day 75 years ago. President Trump joined world leaders on Wednesday in Portsmouth, England. That city served as a key launch point for the invasion. On Thursday, he will attend commemoration services at the U.S. Cemetery in Normandy, and our Elaine Cobb is near the Omaha Beach landing site with a preview.
The main event here tomorrow will be a ceremony to honor D-Day veterans. President Trump and the First Lady will welcome French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife when they arrive. That's because the cemetery here at Colleville is American land, donated to the American people by the French family that owned it. The two leaders will then walk to the stage where 150 American veterans aged between 94 and 100 will be seated. The French president will make a short speech, after which he will present the Legion of Honor, the country's highest honor, to 5 American veterans. One of them, Stan Friday, told me earlier he didn't believe it when he was first told. He said he's accepting it not for himself, but as a representative of his comrades in arms, especially those buried here. Then President Trump will address the crowd. The two leaders will also walk over to where they can look out across Omaha Beach, where American troops suffered the heaviest casualties on D-Day. American and French planes will take part in a flyover, ending the ceremony. The two presidents then go on to nearby Caen for bilateral talks and a working lunch. Officials tell me they'll talk about international security, Iran and trade links, but they'll also talk about the ceremonies continuing here along the Normandy beaches for the next several days. Major?
Elaine Cobb, thank you very much. Let's turn now to Alex Kershaw. He is a historian and author of multiple books on D-Day, including his most recent work, the title, The First Wave, the D-Day warriors who led the way to victory in World War II. Let me set this up, Alex, with this question. On this night 75 years ago, a colonel named Robert Sink of the 101st Airborne wrote a message to soldiers of that regiment, which read in part, quote, "Tonight is the night of nights. Tomorrow, throughout the whole of our homeland and the Allied world, the bells will ring out the tidings that you have arrived and the invasion for liberation has begun." Alex, give us some perspective on what the Allied forces were embarking on, what they were facing, and the risks involved.
Well, they were facing enormous dangers. This invasion had never been attempted on any kind of scale like this before. The Germans knew we were going to come at some point. They didn't know exactly when and where. They were well prepared. We were facing a very determined enemy, and the risks were enormous. They were the greatest of any invasion in World War II.
Alex, this is a digital platform. The demographics for our audience much younger than on network television. One of the reasons I wanted to do this segment is to try to convey to Americans in our audience, 35, maybe a little bit younger, the enormity of this moment in history and why it was kind of a hinge for much of the 20th century, that what happened after D-Day and what occurred before it are kind of marking lines for humanity, at least in the European and Western world. Can you help my audience get a sense of that?
Well, if you look at Europe today, you wouldn't have democracies and you wouldn't have peace and prosperity in Western Europe today had D-Day not succeeded. We've had 75 years of unity and peace and democracy in Western Europe. That's because of what happened on D-Day, June the 6th, 1944.
And for those who planned this, there was the invasion itself then, and I think this is kind of a fascinating side story, or maybe it's not even a side story, central to the ultimate success, a lot of diversions and signals meant to convey something to the Germans that wasn't actually true.
Yeah, we had a very successful counterintelligence operation before D-Day. We had to make sure that the Germans split their forces, that they didn't know exactly when we were going to arrive and where, and we were very successful. So on D-Day, we faced about half of the forces that we could have faced had we failed to deceive the Germans correctly.
And Alex, it is often said that World War II was the last morally clear-cut conflict between what we regard philosophically as good and evil. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure whether I would totally agree with that, but what I would say is that there were countless millions of Europeans who were given hope. They had been enslaved for several years. Anne Frank in Amsterdam, in her diary, wrote on the 6th of June when she heard the news that friends were arriving at last. Europe was liberated. It was not conquered. And we have enjoyed enormous freedoms ever since. It was a very, very important moment in world history, and one that we should be very grateful for and remember every day that we can vote and live in democracy.
Alex, with your indulgence, I want to play a reflection from Roy Hewick, a 93-year-old Army Ranger veteran. Let's please take a listen.
I feel bad because when you come in here and you see all these the burials, I feel bad about that because we were lucky and we didn't get buried, but these guys, they run out of luck. You know, they're the real heroes, you know. They say we're the heroes, but I think the heroes are right there.
Alex, in my conversations throughout my reporting career with veterans of all conflicts, but especially World War II, that is a recurrent sentiment. I'm not the hero. The heroes were left behind.
Absolutely. I have to say that those guys who fought and survived were heroes, but 20,000 Americans died in the Battle for Normandy, 900 alone on D-Day on just one beach, Omaha Beach. So, yes, we should remember the dead, absolutely. In fact, the man that you were talking to was in a graveyard where you have over 9,300 Americans buried just above Omaha Beach. Now, think about this. If those guys had lived, if they had lived to be able to talk about D-Day today, all of those guys together would have had 600,000 human life years. That's what we lost for Americans on D-Day, 600,000 life years.
Alex, we have about 30 seconds to go. I just want you to convey to my audience the naval importance of this. So much of the videography is about the landing, but without the naval forces, it seems to me this doesn't happen.
Absolutely. Well, we needed the naval forces to be able to land over 150,000 Allied troops, but we also needed the naval forces for two other things. One, to bomb the hell out of the German defences, and two, to save the day on several beaches, namely Omaha Beach, where the Navy came in so close that certain ships actually touched the bottom of the ocean. Very accurate naval fire saved the day on Omaha and was incredibly important to the entire Allied operation.
Alex Kershaw, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your expertise on this, and thanks for conveying to my audience the underlying and continued importance of D-Day. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.